So today we have with us a Raspberry Pi version 4 8 GB, and we are going to install Windows in it. So this is an original Raspberry Pi and it comes with this instructions and a manual which I'm not going to read, and I have also bought an original Raspberry Pi cover which I have already installed over the Raspberry Pi. So as far as the ports are concerned, it has an Ethernet port, two USB 3.0 ports, two ordinary USB ports, probably 2.0. And in here we have a speakerphone jack, two HDMI ports to connect to two different monitors, and a power port. The power port is USB Type-C, and the two HDMI ports are micro HDMI ports. You cannot power in an actual HDMI cable in here. You need a micro HDMI to HDMI cable, something like this. And at the back of this, it has a port for memory card. Let's first try to power this on and let's see if this works or not. I just connected this with my TV and here it is. So this is working fine. So now that our Raspberry Pi is working fine, it is booting fine. So we are going to install a stripped out version of Windows 10 on our Raspberry Pi. But before we can do that, we have to update our bootloader. So to update our Raspberry Pi's bootloader, we need to install the Raspberry Pi Major, which I already did. Here it is. It has two options, choose operating system and choose storage. But before we choose either of them, we have to install a blank SD card in our computer. So the same SD card that we will be inserting in our Raspberry Pi, we will have to install that using a memory card reader to our computer. And once you have installed, so we have to click on choose operating system, here miscellaneous utility images, here bootloader, and I will be using this SD card bootloader, and the storage is the SD card that we are going to choose to install this image to. So I have already inserted one, and here it is. So I will be using this. Cross confirm that this is the SD card that you want this to install into. If accidentally you selected your hard disk or any other disk, it is going to wipe it off. So doubly check that this is the right location. So this is, in my case, it is a 16 GB SD card. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to click on write. So this is giving us a fair warning. Yes, we want to continue. So now we have the latest version of Raspberry Pi bootloader on our SD card. Now we are going to install this back to our Raspberry Pi. So now I have installed the SD card in the Raspberry Pi. Now I'm going to power this on. So if this works correctly, then we are going to see a green screen here. So we have a green screen here. So that means that our bootloader has been updated. Now we are going to power off our Raspberry Pi and remove the SD card. Now that we have the latest version of bootloader on our Raspberry Pi, we can start downloading Windows on it. So to start the installation process, the very first thing that we need is Windows on Raspberry Pi Major, which we can get from the official website of the project. The URL is in the description. And once you have downloaded this, you will also need a Windows image, which is available on this URL. So we just have to open this URL. And in here, there are various versions, but I would recommend public release. It is the most stable version. So the architecture that we need for is ARM64. So this is what we are going to select in here. Select the latest version, which in this case is this. So choose your language. Mine is English. I will click on next. And here, because we have limited space, just select the version that you need. I will select the Pro version of Windows. Click next and click create download package. Once you click on this, you will download a file like this. Just extract this. You will get a folder like this. And in here, execute this command, uup download windows.cmd. and it is going to take a lot of time because it is going to download the image from Microsoft servers, and then it does some processing, and after that, once it is finished, it will ask you to press 0 key, and once it does, you will get the ISO image here. So this is what we are going to install on our Raspberry Pi. So now we have the latest version of bootloader on our Raspberry Pi 4, and we have the image for Windows. Now let's install the image to our Raspberry Pi. For this, we need Windows on Raspberry Pi Imager, which we have already downloaded. So here, make sure that you check that you meet the requirements in here. Once you have downloaded this, extract this and execute this. Before we begin, install the SD card back into the computer. And in here, let's start the process. Select your language. Mine is English. I'm going to click next. And in the device, we are going to select our device, which in our case is Raspberry Pi 4. So we have already updated the bootloader to the latest version, so we can ignore this warning. In here, we have to select the storage drive. So mine is the 16 GB USB device, which is right here. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to select next, and in the image, we have to select the image that we downloaded in the previous step. So in our folder, so this is the image that we want. So I'm going to copy this path. It will auto detect the Windows version. That's okay. I'm going to leave it as it is. So use the latest package available on the server. I'm going to accept this without even reading that. So this is again. And these options, I'm going to leave these to their default values. And here, once again, make sure that this is the storage drive that you want to format. Otherwise, you may accidentally format a disk drive on your computer. It is going to install the ISO image to our Raspberry Pi. And let's wait and watch. It took a few hours, but the installation is now completed. So we can click on finish. And now we are going to insert this memory card into our Raspberry Pi. I have inserted the memory card. Now I am booting this up. And finally, the Windows 10 is working on your Raspberry Pi. Now, before I set this up, I will make a few tweaks. For example, by default, Raspberry Pi uses only 3 GB of RAM. So we will make a little change in its BIOS setup so that it allows it to use the whole 8 GB of RAM. So we first have to go to the device manager. Then we have to go to the Raspberry Pi configuration, and in here advanced configuration, and here this is the option. Limit RAM to 3 GB, we have to disable this. So let's restart this and let's see if that the speed has increased or not. There seems to be some improvement in the progress bar. It is moving fast. And in here, I want to show you this. This is a USB sound card. When you install Windows on Raspberry Pi, the onboard 3.5 mm jack does not work and it does not have a port for mic. Therefore, I will be connecting this to one of its USB port. It has a port for mic and a port for speaker. After fixing the RAM, the speed of startup process and Windows did increase. However, it was still not as good as I had expected. So I ended up replacing my memory card. The memory card that I was using during this process was a 10-year-old class 4 type memory card, which is too slow for installing Windows to it. So I now bought and replaced that with the class 10 type A1 memory card, and after which the Windows has become a lot faster. So let's see what configuration is this showing. So here we have 7.85 GB usable from 8 GB RAM. That's good. 64-bit ARM based processor. That's okay. And it is saying right here, so you probably cannot see this. Let me show that to you. It is saying that this is a test version. And in the system properties, it is asking to activate the Windows. So probably if we connect to internet, it will try to activate it. So let's first try to connect to internet. At this point, I noticed that Wi-Fi is not working. Bluetooth was working fine, but Wi-Fi was not working. So I had to connect Raspberry Pi to Ethernet. And after connecting to internet, it asked to activate, and we had to enter an actual Windows 10 key to activate this, which I did. Overall, the speed and performance of Windows on Raspberry Pi was good enough. One would not know if he is working on a laptop or Raspberry Pi if he had to work on this for a few days. However, there are few problems that might prevent you from doing any work on a Raspberry Pi. They were, first is obviously that Wi-Fi is not working, onboard audio is not working, for which we had connected a USB sound card. That's okay. Still, there are a few more onboard devices that are not working as we would expect them to. But something that is even more troublesome is that Raspberry Pi is built on ARM architecture. That means it cannot run apps that were built for x86, that is 32-bit, or x64, that is 64-bit. However, Windows 10 has an emulator for x86 apps. So if Windows is running on an ARM architecture, it can emulate x86 apps on it, but it cannot run x64 or 64-bit apps at all. And these days it is hard to find any new app that is built for 32-bit and not for 64-bit. So many of the software that I wanted to test on it didn't run on it at all. So we can fix that by installing Windows 11 instead of Windows 10, which we will be doing in our next video. So Windows 11 has an emulator that can run both x86 and x64 apps on ARM architecture. So we will be installing Windows 11 and testing some of these apps in next video. Thank you for watching.